Welcome to Cozy Love Stories, your home for wholesome, dreamy romances to help you relax and unwind. Today's story follows Hannah Walker, who never planned to take over her family's farm. But when a sudden accident leaves her father unable to work, she's thrust into the role. Now she must juggle the weight of a family legacy and the pressure of running the farm, all while keeping a major secret. With the tractor on the verge of breaking down, a family divided, and a growing connection with the enigmatic Jack Turner, Hannah is facing more than just the harvest. As secrets unravel and feelings deepen, Hannah must decide if she's willing to risk everything for a chance at happiness. So settle in, let the world slow down, and enjoy today's story, Harvest Heart. Chapter 1. Morning light shimmered through the aspens as Hannah Walker trudged up the dirt path, boots caked in soil and the scent of compost clinging to her sleeves. She hefted a crate of kale, rainbow chard, and late-season squash, the last of the morning's harvest for the Saturday market. Behind her, neat rows of vegetables glistened with dew. A cluster of hand-lettered signs marked the plot as Walker Organics, though her father liked to joke it should read Hannah's Hobby Corner. The screen door creaked as Sam Walker stepped onto the porch, coffee in hand. He squinted into the sun, then flashed her a lopsided grin. "You ever think those vegetables care about your fancy degree? Lord knows why I humored you going to school," he said. "Morning to you too, Dad," she laughed, brushing her braid over her shoulder. "And no, I doubt the kale cares about my regenerative farming degree, but the soil sure does," she added. Sam looked past her, eyeing the rows of vegetables. "Funny how no one else in the last 5 generations of Walkers needed a diploma to plant a spud," he said. "Maybe not," Hannah replied, brushing dirt from her knees. "But none of you tested soil microbiomes either. My organic plot increased its yield by 12% over last year. We should really try these changes on the potato fields." She didn't know why she kept trying. Ever since moving home after graduation, she'd been nudging her father to adapt. But he was a Walker, stubborn to the bone. "Potato fields are fine, and increased yields don't mean much from a sandbox-sized plot," he said. But Hannah didn't bite. "It's not the size, Dad. It's the concept. I was thinking, we could regenerate the fallow acres by the creek. We'd have healthier soil, less runoff. I think there could be some real long-term gains." Sam only grunted, but gave no argument. A win, by Walker standards. The screen door banged open. Her younger brother Luke jogged down the porch steps. Tall and lanky at 17, he had the Walker eyes, blue like a mountain, but they were always fixed on another horizon, one filled with screens, not crops. "Wi-Fi's too spotty to compile my code again," he said. "Maybe because you're not supposed to be coding when there's work to do," Sam said without turning. "You think those spuds grow themselves?" Luke's smile faltered. He didn't belong in the rows any more than Sam belonged in a boardroom. Forcing him into this life would crush him. Sam couldn't, or wouldn't, see it. Grandpa Henry, however, saw everything. He and Grandma Maggie lived in the farm cottage nearby. They had a gift for spotting the sparks in their grandkids, flickers of passion that didn't always fit neatly into farm life. When Luke spent hours dismantling radios, Grandpa Henry bought him a soldering kit. When Hannah came home with a soil science ribbon, Grandma Maggie baked a pie and told her she was destined to change the world. They didn't clip wings. They helped them spread. That afternoon, fresh from the market with sun still on her shoulders, Hannah stepped into the mudroom and froze. Voices, sharp and rising, spilled from the living room. She didn't need to hear the details to piece it together. Luke had probably finished chores early again and gone back to coding. Sam, predictably, caught him. In her father's eyes, finishing one task never excused walking away from the 100 others still waiting. She set the crate down just as Sam's voice cracked like a whip. "You think this is a game, Luke? This is your future. Our future." Hannah stepped in, calm but firm. "Dad, the fields aren't going anywhere. He's helping in his own way too. Maybe not with a shovel, but he's smart. You know that," she said. Sam's eyes flared. "Smart won't keep those rows from rotting," he barked. "Neither will yelling," Hannah said, steady despite her pulse. "Luke's not trying to let you down." "I'm not ignoring the farm," Luke cut in, voice tight. "I'm trying to help. I'm building an app to track our yields, expenses, equipment schedules. It could save time and money." Sam's face darkened. "I don't need a website. I've got instinct. That's what keeps this place running. What I need is for you to put your family first and pull your weight." Grandma Maggie's voice rang out from the kitchen. "That's enough, Sam. Go cool down. Before you say something you'll regret." Sam stormed out, boots pounding the porch. Maggie gathered the kids. "Come on," she said, guiding them to the kitchen, where the scent of coffee and cornbread wrapped around them like a hug. Soon, Grandpa Henry ambled in with his mug, eyes narrowing. "What happened now? I heard yelling from the cottage," he said. "Same as always," Maggie muttered, slicing pie. Henry sighed. "Your dad's like my old man. Loves this farm so much, he can't see the forest for the trees." He stared off for a moment, appearing lost in a memory, before turning to Luke thoughtfully and saying, "Senior year coming up, huh? Big decisions ahead." He paused, watching the boy closely. "If this coding thing isn't just a phase, and I don't think it is, you better start thinking about what's next." He nodded, like it was settled. "If you want that engineering degree, Luke, you go after it." "Yeah, but who'll run the farm?" Luke asked. Henry chuckled. "For someone so bright, your head's still a bit thick. Your sister'll run it. She's got more talent in her pinky than I ever did." Luke turned to Hannah. "But what about your dreams?" She grinned. "My dreams have always been right here, Luke. I would love to run the farm. I have so many ideas that could make a difference. And seeing you chase your own dreams, that means everything," she said. "So," Maggie chirped, "what are we going to do about this situation? Luke, do you still have that college list?" He nodded. "Good," she continued. "Step 1, figure out where you'll apply." "But what will Dad say?" Luke asked. "Leave that part to me," Henry said, squeezing his shoulder. The next few months passed in a blur of potato harvesting and helping Luke research schools. He narrowed his list to 5 and applied early, cheered on by his sister and grandparents. When the Stanford email came in December, Luke stared at it like a doorway to another world. "Dad'll never go for it," he whispered. Henry's eyes softened. "Then take a gap year. I'll talk to him. Just give it time." His hand closed over Luke's like a promise. "We'll start working on your dad after the holidays. He'll come around." 3 weeks later, on a cold January day, Sam and Henry's long-simmering argument over Luke exploded. A shouting match, sharp words, and then, like a cruel afterthought, Grandpa Henry's heart gave out. He was gone before the ambulance even arrived. Grief settled over the walkers like snow. Sam buried his sorrow in bitterness. Guilt hardened into anger, not at Luke or Hannah, But at the man he'd lost, in that hollow space, his convictions calcified. The farm would pass to Luke, not Hannah. Chapter 2. 6 months after that January day, spring gave way to summer, and life on the Walker farm carried on as if nothing had changed, except everything had. Luke had graduated and was in his gap year, straddling 2 worlds. He spent mornings hauling farm equipment and evenings hunched over his laptop, drafting plans for an engineering future that felt as fragile as glass. One evening, Hannah found him on the tailgate of his truck, staring at the darkening fields. "You okay?" she asked, easing down beside him. Luke shrugged. "Dad still thinks I'm here for good. How am I supposed to tell him I'm not?" Hannah bumped his shoulder. "We'll figure it out, one step at a time, Luke." For a while, things almost felt normal. The season was strong, rows of potatoes thriving. The family counted on a good harvest come September. But fate had other plans. It happened fast. Sam climbed down from the hayloft to fetch a forgotten tool, his boot slipping on a loose rung, the crack of wood, a sickening thud. When Hannah reached him, he lay pale on the floor, 2 broken legs, the fractures so severe they required surgery. He'd need several days in the hospital, months of recovery after that. Before they wheeled him in for surgery, Sam gripped Luke's arm, voice tight with pain. "It's time for you to step up," he said. "You're the man now. Run the farm until I'm back." Luke nodded, but when he, Hannah, and Grandma Maggie returned to the quiet house hours later, Hannah saw the tension beneath his silence. When she gently prodded, the dam cracked. "I can't do it," he said, voice breaking. "Can't run the farm?" Hannah asked. "You don't have to worry about that. I'll help you. Everything will be fine." "No," Luke replied. "You don't understand. An internship offer came in today from Orion Robotics in Boise. It's paid and real experience. I could even drive there from the farm. If I turn this down, but I have to. There's no way I can swing the internship now." Maggie set her teacup down with a firm clink. "You're not turning it down, Luke." He stared at her. "How? Dad's expecting me to run the farm." Maggie's eyes held a familiar twinkle. "Then that's changed. Your sister will run the farm while your dad recovers." She turned to Hannah. "You don't just have that fancy degree. You've got the know-how. Grandpa Henry always saw it in you," she said. "Only one problem," Hannah answered. "Dad will never agree, Grandma." Maggie's chin lifted. "What my son doesn't know won't hurt him. This is your chance, Hannah, to prove him wrong and give Luke the freedom Henry wanted. Are you both really going to throw that away?" Luke and Hannah exchanged a long glance. Doubt wrestled with resolve in Hannah's chest, but finally she nodded. "Okay, we do this. For Grandpa." Luke squeezed her hand. Just like that, the plan was set, a secret that would change everything by harvest. Chapter 3. Morning light spilled over the fields, gilding the rows like a promise Hannah wasn't sure she could keep. 2 days had passed since Sam's accident, and now the weight of the farm and the secret rested on her shoulders. Invoices fanned out across the table, coffee cooling as Hannah scribbled figures in the ledger. Seed costs, fuel, equipment. It felt like juggling knives blindfolded. When vendors asked why she was handling orders, she said Luke had passed off the paperwork to focus on field work. Somehow they believed her, and she didn't worry they'd say anything to her father. Fortunately, Sam also didn't have any farm hands employed who might blab either. she'd have to figure out something else closer to harvest. Maybe between her, Luke, and Grandma, they could swing the harvest on their own. From the doorway, Grandma Maggie's voice cut through. "You're going to burn a hole in that paper with all your frowning." She set down a plate of warm biscuits. "Eat something, honey. Farming on an empty stomach never did anyone good." "I will," Hannah murmured, mind already on irrigation schedules and vendor calls. Luke barricaded himself in his room with textbooks and blueprints, prepping for the internship like a man building a lifeboat. But sometimes Hannah caught him pacing the hall, guilt flickering in his eyes. "You sure about this?" he asked one evening, leaning against the doorframe. "Nope," she said with a wry smile. "But we don't have much choice, do we?" Sam called every afternoon from his hospital bed, voice rough from painkillers, but steady with expectation. "How's my boy holding up out there?" he'd ask, never doubting Luke was running the show. Luke always swallowed hard before answering. "Good, just a lot to learn, you know?" His forced laugh had splinters in it. Hannah hovered nearby. If Sam sensed the smallest crack in their story, the plan would shatter. Mercifully, it held. When Sam was discharged, they moved him home and set him up in his bedroom. He'd be bedridden for 12 weeks before starting physical therapy. They placed a small table by his bed so the family could still share dinner. Prior to each meal, Hannah filled Luke in on the day's accomplishments so he could answer Sam's inevitable questions without missing a beat. Weeks blurred into a rhythm of early mornings and bone-deep exhaustion. Hannah met with seed reps, negotiated deliveries, studied weather patterns like scripture. At night, she lay awake, praying her gamble wouldn't blow up before harvest. Grandma Maggie remained the steady heartbeat of the house, slipping Hannah advice in the kitchen, offering Luke quiet support, and carrying the secret like a badge of honor. "Henry would be proud," she told Hannah one night while washing dishes. "You've got farming in your bones, girl, don't doubt it." But Grandma Maggie's sweet words couldn't massage the tension out of Hannah's shoulders. A few weeks into Sam's recovery, he gestured for Hannah to sit with him after she delivered his lunch tray. He looked pale, worn thin by pain, but his eyes burned clear. "How's Hannah's hobby corner doing, kiddo?" he asked. "It's going all right. More folks have been stopping by the stand. I think word's spreading," she said. Sam shifted, wincing. "You know, I've been thinking about that fallow strip by the creek. You still wanting to try your methods there? That regenerative stuff you keep harping on about." Hannah's heart skipped. "You mean expanding my organic plot?" He nodded. "Long as it doesn't pull help from the main crops, it's yours. Might as well test your ideas on land we ain't using. I trust you, Hannah." She swallowed, throat tight. "Thanks, Dad. I won't let you down." "I know," he said, reaching for his water. "Just don't make me drink any of that compost tea you're always talking about." She laughed, blinking back tears. "No promises." As she closed the door behind her, Sam's word echoed in her chest. "I trust you, Hannah." She hadn't expected them. Not like that. And hearing them now, after everything, made the secret feel heavier. Her father thought Luke had finally stepped up. But it was Hannah rising before dawn and falling asleep in her work boots as she quietly kept the farm afloat. What would happen when he found out? She wanted to believe he'd understand, that he'd see the love behind the lie. But in the silence wrapping the house and fields, questions kept threading through her resolve. What if trusting her now only made the betrayal cut deeper later? What if Dad never forgives me? Chapter 4. By late August, Hannah had almost convinced herself they could pull it off. The crops were healthy, her organic stand was thriving, and the weather had been kind. Each small win stitched more confidence into her chest. For the first time in weeks, she let herself breathe and maybe even feel a flicker of pride. She woke before dawn, walking the rows in the cool hush of morning, boots sinking into soft earth. She started the tractor and worked for hours, but just as she finished the east rows, the engine let out a metallic screech, followed by a hiss of steam. It shuddered forward a few more feet, then jerked to a stop. She climbed down, heart-thudding, and stared at the puddle forming beneath it. Hydraulic fluid, not a quick fix. As she trudged back to the house, her phone buzzed. "How's my girl doing?" her dad asked. "Realized I forgot to ask you yesterday. How'd it go at the stand? Sell out of all that fancy organic stuff you grow?" Hannah forced her voice steady. "Almost. Things are going really well. Since you let me plant those fallow acres, I expanded into a bigger spot at the market. Even had to bring an extra table." There was a pause. Then Sam chuckled. "Well, look at you. What are you saving up for with all that extra dough? New shoes? Or a one-way ticket to Napa to start your own vineyard?" he said. "Something like that." She forced a laugh, but her mind flashed back to the leaking tractor. "Good. Your brother's learning fast. I bet we start harvesting mid-September. I can't get a hold of him, probably too busy working, but remind him to keep that tractor serviced. We can't afford downtime now." Her throat tightened. Couldn't he have mentioned that little detail a few weeks ago? "Got it. Don't worry, Dad." When the call ended, she pressed her phone to her forehead and let out a shaky breath. "Don't worry, Dad. If only." Grandma Maggie found her in the mudroom, still gripping the phone. One look at Hannah's face and her expression sharpened. "What happened?" she asked. "The tractor," Hannah whispered. "It's dead. We don't have time, and we definitely can't afford a new one with all Dad's medical bills." Maggie rested her hands on Hannah's shoulders. "We'll fix it. We'll get Jack Turner. You know he's the best mechanic in 3 counties. Hannah exhaled, nerves and resolve tangling in her chest. She didn't like the idea of bringing in an outsider, especially someone who worked with her dad enough to know the farm was meant for Luke. But what choice did she have? She needed that tractor or the harvest wouldn't happen. Swallowing her trepidation, she squared her shoulders. Tomorrow, she'd find Jack Turner, whether she wanted to or not. Chapter 5. The next morning, Hannah parked outside Turner Equipment Repair. The bell jingled as she stepped inside, the smell of oil and metal wrapping around her, a country station humming from an old radio in the corner. Jack Turner stood behind the counter, tall, broad-shouldered, with grease on his arms and jaw. His dark hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck, and his coveralls bore the stains of a long morning under a hood. He looked up, eyes sharp, then softened. "Hannah Walker," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Heard about your dad. How's he holding up?" She managed a polite smile. "He's hanging in there. Surgery went well, but it's a long recovery," she said. Jack nodded. "Tough break, literally." His voice was dry, but not unkind. "So what brings you here? Run out of kale seeds for that little organic plot of yours?" She squared her shoulders. "No, our main tractor's dead. I really need someone to take a look." His brows lifted. "Your brother sent you? Figured he'd be the one running things." Hannah shifted her weight. "He's busy." Jack tilted his head. "Too busy to deal with a busted tractor that is critical for your harvest?" She gave a small shrug. "There's a lot going on, you know?" His eyes narrowed slightly. "Uh-huh. So what, he sends his sister to talk shop with me while he handles the heavy lifting? Isn't there some rule about the Walker farm only being run by the eldest son? Her jaw tensed. Something like that. Jack leaned forward, arms crossing over the counter. Hannah. She didn't answer. He let the silence stretch, then added quietly, I've known your dad for a while now, and if you're here asking for help instead of Luke, I figure there's more to the story. Still, she hesitated. Jack raised a brow. You're not doing this just because Luke's busy, are you? She sighed, heat creeping up her neck. I'm running things, okay? Silence stretched between them, broken only by the twang of guitar coming from the radio. Never took you for the type to lie to your dad, Jack said. I don't want to be part of lying to one of my best customers. The accusation landed harder than she expected, and just like that, the tension she'd been carrying, the stress, the guilt, not to mention the years of her father overlooking what she brought to the farm, exploded out of her. You don't get it. Luke has a once-in-a-lifetime internship, something he's worked hard for, and now Dad just expects him to give all that up? To sacrifice everything because of some outdated idea that only a son can run the farm? That's not fair. To Luke or to me. Her voice edged dangerously close to a yell, sharper than she realized. Jack's expression didn't change, but he didn't interrupt. Luke's finally getting a shot at the life he wants, and Dad won't even acknowledge it. So yeah, I'm covering for him, because someone has to. And maybe that makes me the bad guy, but I'm not going to let him throw away his future, and I refuse to let the harvest fail and bankrupt our family. Silence hung between them. Hannah took a deep breath and continued. I know you're uncomfortable, Jack, but right now I've got a farm to save, and I could really use your help. Jack exhaled and tossed the rag onto the counter. All right, I'll take a look. Just be careful, Hannah. Lies have a way of catching up with you, especially in a small town. Hannah nodded, releasing her breath. Now let's go see what we're working with. But I need you to know, fixing a tractor this close to harvest won't be cheap or easy. I'll figure it out, she said, relief stirring with worry. He grabbed his keys. Let's go see what we're working with. Back at the farm, Jack circled the tractor. Pop the hood, please, Hannah. He crouched low, hands moving with practiced ease. Minutes later, he straightened, wiping grease from his forearm. Transmission failure. You've got more than one issue. One of the main gears is chewed up. Clutch assembly's nearly gone. You figured that out fast, Hannah said. Jack shrugged. I used to design these things. She blinked. I thought you were always in repair. Not always. His gaze drifted. Used to be an engineer at a big ag equipment company back east. Corner office, high pay. Why'd you leave? Hannah asked. Burnt out. Corporate cared more about service fees than good design. They knew the weak spots, built them in, and farmers paid the price. He paused. I couldn't be a part of it anymore. She looked at him, the caution in her chest softening. You walked away from all that? Jack's jaw flexed. Sometimes staying costs more. I quit and used my stock to start this place. Wind rustled the potato rows. Silence lingered. Finally, he cleared his throat. Come by the shop tomorrow. I'll have estimates for you. We'll need to rush order parts if we have any hope of fixing this in time. Hannah nodded, thoughts racing. Jack Turner was more than she expected, and now their fates were tangled tighter than she planned. Chapter 6. The next morning, Hannah drove into town early. Potential repair costs buzzing in her head. She could hardly sleep the prior night. Worries swirled in her mind of how she'd manage to pay for the repairs. Before heading to the shop, she made a detour to the Bean and Birch Cafe, the warm, fragrant haven owned by her friend, Sophie Caldwell. Sophie wasn't just a friend. She'd been like family for as long as Hannah could remember. Back when Hannah was in kindergarten, Sophie had been her 5th grade big buddy, a steady presence during those early school years. When Hannah lost her mom as a teenager and her dad withdrew into his grief, Sophie became a lifeline. Over the years, that bond deepened, turning into the kind of friendship built on trust, laughter, and countless cups of coffee shared across this very counter. And today, Hannah needed a friend. The bell above the door chimed as she stepped inside, greeted by the aroma of espresso and the sight of Sophie's easy grin from behind the counter. "Well, look what the wind blew in," Sophie said, sliding a black coffee across the counter without needing to ask what Hannah wanted. "You've got that pinched look on your face, Shug." Sophie turned to one of her employees. "Dawn, I'm going to take my break. You good watching the shop?" Dawn nodded warmly, and Sophie led Hannah to the back room. "All right, let's hear it." Hannah wrapped her hands around the cup, grateful for the warmth. "It's been a week. Dad's still stuck upstairs with no idea I'm running the farm. Luke's juggling a million things for his internship, and now the tractor's down." Sophie arched a brow. "That sounds like a nightmare." Her tone softened as she leaned closer. "You okay?" she asked. "I will be," Hannah said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Jack Turner's looking at it, actually," she added. At that, Sophie's eyes lit with mischief. "Jack Turner, huh? Tall, dark, and covered in engine grease?" Hannah rolled her eyes. "Sophie, come on." "What? I'm just saying, you better be careful spending so much time around a cute guy like that. Wouldn't want you going all googly-eyed when you're supposed to be saving the farm." Sophie grinned. "Then again, maybe a boyfriend's exactly what you need to take the edge off. Something that's fun and just for you." Heat crept up Hannah's neck. "No way, Soph. I've got enough on my plate without adding romance to the mix," she said. "Uh-huh. Tell yourself that if it helps you sleep at night." Sophie smirked. Hannah giggled, despite herself at Sophie's antics. For a brief moment, the weight she'd been carrying felt lighter, almost manageable. The two headed back to the main room of the cafe. For the next 45 minutes, Hannah and Sophie chatted in between customers, and by the time Hannah left the cafe, she felt better. Small tendrils of hope rose up within her that the repair costs wouldn't be as bad as she feared, but her optimism was soon dashed. 12,000? Hannah gasped, staring at the estimate sheet Jack had given her like it was a ticking time bomb. "It's a big job, Hannah. This type of repair will normally run you north of 16 grand. I've given you as much of a discount as I can swing for your dad's sake. He's been a good customer, but the cost of the parts and getting them rushed here is out of my hands. That's on the vendor, and this is the best I can do." Seeing Hannah's stricken face, Jack's voice softened a bit. "But I promise, if we get the parts in fast, I can have you running before harvest." Hannah's mind whirled as she tried to sort out how she was going to pay for this. Had this happened before her dad's accident, she could have swung the fee easily, but their savings had been seriously depleted by medical costs, and there just hadn't been enough time to build it back up. They had enough to keep the farm operating, but there wouldn't be anything extra until after they'd cashed out this year's crop. "Look, I've got about 5,000 saved up from the produce stand. Could I give you that as a down payment and then pay you the rest in installments?" she asked. Jack sighed. "The parts alone will be 6K. I can take installments from you for my part, but we've got to pay the vendor that 6K in full." Hannah deflated. How was she going to come up with the extra cash? She looked to Jack, weighing her options. His jaw ticked. Then his face took on a determined look. "I can cover the cost for you, Hannah," he said at last. Hannah bristled. "I don't take charity, Jack Turner." "It won't be charity," he replied. "You're going to help me with a project. We'll call it a trade." "What sort of project?" Hannah asked warily. I promised the mayor I'd build her a welcome arch for the harvest festival. She's paying me $2,500 for it, but if I'm going to have enough time to fix your tractor, I need to get a few other repairs wrapped up early. I won't have the time to work on the arch. That's where you come in. You'll help me cut up the metal piping and weld the frame together. For your trouble, I'll give you $1,000 advance that we can use to pay for the tractor parts," Jack explained. "I appreciate the offer, Jack, but I've got to be honest, I don't know how to weld," Hannah said. "It's not that hard, I'll teach you. I promise you'll pick it up quick," replied Jack, nodding his head as if convincing himself that this was, indeed, a good idea. "And when am I going to have the time to do that, Jack? I've got a farm to run," Hannah cried. "Seems to me like there won't be much for you to do until your tractor's fixed," Jack retorted. Well, he had Hannah there, but could she really do this? Sure, she was handy on the farm, but this project would take her totally out of her element. Then again, she had a farm to save. If she ever wanted a shot at taking it over from her father one day, this was the moment to prove she could do whatever it took to keep the farm alive. Determination settled over her like armor. "Okay, Jack, you've got a deal." She extended her hand. His grip was firm and warm, his calloused fingers closing around hers with quiet strength, sending a spark through her fingers. Sophie's earlier teasing arose unbidden in her mind. She told herself it was ridiculous. But as she pulled her hand away and looked up at him, she couldn't ignore the truth. He really was handsome, rugged in a way that suddenly made her pulse trip over itself. She banished the thought. Your heart's just racing because you're dealing with a stressful situation. That's all. Hannah bid Jack goodbye, promising to come by tomorrow to start working on the harvest arch. But as she drove back to the farm, with her hand tingling from the memory of his touch, she found her mind preoccupied with more than just repair costs and welding. Chapter 7. The next day, Hannah returned to Turner Equipment Repair. Jack was already clearing space on a workbench stacked high with steel tubing. "Ready to learn how to weld?" he asked, glancing up with an unreadable expression that managed to unsettle her. "Ready as I'll ever be," Hannah replied, masking her nerves with a smile. Jack walked her through the basics, safety gear and how to cut angles and guide the torch. The pipes they were using were hollow but sturdy, light enough to transport to the fairgrounds once the frame was complete. Sparks danced like fireflies as Hannah clumsily traced her first seam, her helmet fogging with heat. "Not bad," Jack murmured, leaning close to inspect her work. The praise sent a warmth through her that had nothing to do with the welding torch. Jack tipped his head, a faint grin tugging at his mouth. "Careful, Walker. You keep this up and I'll be out of a job." Hannah snorted under her helmet. "Pretty sure you're safe. I'm about as good at this as a goat would be trying to tap dance." "Could have fooled me," he answered, voice low and teasing. "You've got a steady hand. That's half the battle," he said. Was he flirting? Before she could decide, Jack added with a smirk, "Next lesson, maybe I'll have you crafting something fancy, like a coat rack or a wine holder. Impress all your friends." Hannah laughed, the sound bubbling out before she could stop it. "Pretty sure my friends would settle for anything that doesn't collapse under its own weight." Jack smiled. "Tell you what, next time I'll grade your welds. Gold star if they hold together." Hannah grinned despite herself. "And if they don't?" she asked. "Then you owe me a coffee. Word on the street is you've got an in with the cafe owner," he said. "Deal," she answered. As he turned away to start working on a project, she suddenly realized what she'd agreed to. Was he trying to ask her out on a coffee date? Was this flirting? No, surely not. She ducked her head, telling herself he was just being encouraging. He was trying to get her best work out of her, that's all. Jack needed the arch to look good, so it didn't ruin his reputation in front of the whole town. Still, the way his eyes lingered made her lose focus on the practice weld she was working on. With a growl, she started again. Over the next few weeks, Hannah returned almost daily between tending to the farm. Jack usually worked on other projects in the background, rebuilding transmissions and tuning engines, while Hannah pieced the arch together with growing confidence. But every so often, he'd make a point of coming to help her, chatting at first for a few minutes at a time, before their talks eventually grew longer and longer. As the days passed, an easy rhythm formed between them, shared coffee, friendly banter, and the occasional brush of hands that made her pulse skip. One evening, after washing the soot from her arms, Hannah found herself lingering by the shop door. Without her realizing, Jack's quiet friendship was turning into a different kind of closeness. Sophie's teasing echoed in her mind, and for the first time, Hannah didn't dismiss it outright. Jack's voice pulled her back from her thoughts. "You planning on leaving, or are you just supervising the door now?" Hannah startled slightly and turned to find him leaning against the workbench, a crooked grin on his face. "Just, thinking," she said, fumbling for casual. "Dangerous habit," he teased. She laughed softly, shaking her head as she finally reached for the door. "Good night, Jack," she said. "Night, Walker," he answered, his tone light, but his eyes lingered like the warmth of banked embers. By mid-September, the arch's frame was finished. It was a sweeping curve of steel that caught the afternoon light like a silver ribbon. Pride swelled in Hannah's chest as Jack ran a hand along the final weld. "Looks good," he said, his voice carrying a note of admiration. "You did most of this yourself. Hannah, you really should be proud." Before Hannah could answer, Jack added, "Think you'd want to handle the decorations too? You know, make the arch look harvesty. You've got an eye for detail, might as well make it yours." Her heart leapt. "I'd love that." Later, Hannah sat in Sophie's cafe, sketching design ideas on a notepad. Wheat bundles at the base, autumn blooms twining up the sides, tiny white lights for when the festival continued after nightfall. Sophie peeked over Hannah's shoulder to see the designs and whistled. "Looks gorgeous," Sophie said. Then with a sly grin, "So, been seeing a lot of Mr. Tall, Dark, and Greasy lately, huh?" Hannah flushed. "It's not like that." Sophie arched a brow. "Your cheeks say otherwise. Didn't I tell you all that time with him would have you head over heels?" "It doesn't matter how I feel," Hannah muttered. "It's not like Jack would ever notice me in that way." Sophie's smile turned knowing. "Don't be so sure. Some men notice more than you think." Hannah tried to laugh it off, but as she bent over her sketches again, Jack's rugged face kept barging into her thoughts, uninvited and impossible to ignore. Chapter 8. A few days before the Harvest Festival found Hannah and Jack working side by side in the late September sun, maneuvering the arch frame on its supports at the fairgrounds. Jack had nearly finished rebuilding the transmission on Hannah's tractor, and she could feel the weight on her chest finally beginning to lift. He promised the machine would be ready just in time for an early October harvest. For now, though, they set the wrenches aside and turned their attention to the arch. Hannah wiped sweat from her brow and stole a glance at him, before forcing herself to focus on the task at hand. "Not bad, Walker," Jack said. "Looks almost professional." "Almost?" Hannah shot back, grinning. "You wound me, Jack." Before he could reply, the mayor's SUV rolled up. Mayor Klein popped out with her usual flair, phone in hand. "This looks fantastic. People driving by are going to be thrilled." She snapped a quick picture for the town's Instagram, before hopping back into her SUV with a wave, calling out, "Friday night's going to be magic. I bet we get the biggest opening night turnout yet." Hannah's chest swelled with pride as she and Jack watched the mayor drive away. Maybe things were finally turning around. Jack glanced her way, his voice low and warm. "You really showed your stuff out here, Walker. Not half bad for a rookie welder." His grin tilted just a little. "And you weren't that bad to have in the shop either. You know, if I hadn't just hired Randall as my new assistant, might have been tempted to offer you the gig." Hannah laughed, shaking her head. "Pretty sure Randall's job is safe. I'm busy enough on the farm as it is." As they started gathering their tools, a warm glow settled in Hannah's chest. For the first time in weeks, she felt unstoppable, like she could do anything. The illusion shattered the next morning. Hannah's phone lit up with Sophie's text. "Call me, now." Her stomach sank as she dialed. "You sitting down?" Sophie asked, before continuing. "Sheriff Carter came in for coffee this morning, and while we were chatting, he told me some idiot plowed through your arch last night. Texting and driving. Took out the whole thing." Hannah's breath caught. "What? Is everyone okay?" she asked. "Yeah, no one was hurt. Driver tried to flee, but her axle gave out a block away. Cops nabbed her. But Hannah, I'm so sorry. The arch is toast." Hannah's body went numb at Sophie's words. All her hard work down the drain because of one person's careless actions. Minutes later, her phone buzzed with another call, Jack's number lighting up the screen. "You heard?" His voice was clipped, but calm. "Mayor's in a panic. She's offering another $2,000 if we can get a new arch up before the festival opens Friday night," he said. Hannah pinched the bridge of her nose. "But that's 2 days from now. Jack, the arch took me almost 3 weeks to build. That's impossible." "Not if we hustle," Jack countered. "Meet me at the shop in 30. 25 minutes later, Hannah found herself outside Turner's Equipment Repair, ready to hustle. And hustle they did. They worked in sync, measuring steel piping, cutting, shaping, and welding each section. They barely stopped, except for a quick sandwich Sophie dropped by for the two of them. By early evening, the new arch stood proud at the fairgrounds. Plainer than before, but sturdy and strong. Hannah added leftover wheat bundles, sunflowers, and bright orange pumpkins to soften its rough edges, then wove a few strands of remaining twinkle lights through the frame. When the last light blinked to life, Jack stepped back, wiping sweat from his jaw. "Not bad for a day's work." He shot her a grin that made her heart thud. He then pulled 2 cold Coke bottles out of his cooler. Jack handed one to her, the bottle slick with condensation. They sat on the tailgate of his truck, boots dusted in dirt, watching the arch glow in the falling dusk. Conversation flowed easily, as usual. They chatted about the festival, about favorite fair foods, about nothing at all. Jack confessed he had a weakness for kettle corn, while Hannah swore nothing beat warm apple cider donuts. They debated which band would steal the show on opening night and laughed over childhood mishaps, like the time Hannah's prized pig escaped during a 4-H show and sent the judges scrambling. Jack shared how he once tripped over a power cord during a big corporate meeting and spilled an entire pitcher of water on his boss's lap. Hannah burst out laughing. "Guess that's the perk of being your own boss now. No one to fire you when you fled the conference table," she said. As the sky deepened to indigo and crickets began their evening chorus, Hannah let herself soak in the easy warmth of Jack's voice and the soft glow of the arch lights. It was nice to just breathe. "So, Hannah, I was thinking," Jack said. "Wonder if you could spare me a dance at the festival tomorrow." Hannah blinked, heat rushing to her cheeks. "Yeah, sure, I guess." He cracked a grin. "Wow, Careful there, Walker. Your enthusiasm might knock me right off this tailgate. Hannah blushed. If only he knew just how thrilled she was. Back at home later that night, exhaustion wrapped around Hannah like a heavy quilt, but sleep didn't come easy. Her thoughts snagged on Jack's smile and the way they really did make a great team rebuilding the Harvest Festival arch. Then, another thought struck her, like a spark in dry straw. If they rebuilt an entire arch in a single day, Jack surely could have built the first one alone in a weekend. He hadn't actually needed her help at all. For a moment, irritation flared. He'd tricked her into accepting his help with the tractor payment. But as her mind replayed the many long afternoons she'd spent at the shop sharing easy conversation with Jack, and she considered that her newfound knowledge of welding would be useful for the farm, Hannah's anger melted. If it meant learning new skills, saving the farm, and spending time with him, maybe it was the best trick anyone had ever played on her. Still, he had tricked her, and his handsome face wasn't going to get him out of being called out for it. She closed her eyes, with a smile playing on her lips. After all, she thought, a little accountability never hurt anyone. Chapter 9. The Harvest Festival was in full swing by the time Hannah arrived. Strings of lights crisscrossed the fairgrounds, casting a warm glow over hay bales, pumpkin displays, and booths brimming with pies and preserves. Laughter mingled with the hum of fiddle music and the scent of kettle corn drifting through the crisp autumn air. She spotted Jack near the hayride wagon, hands shoved in his pockets, looking relaxed in a dark plaid shirt that fit him almost too well. Her heart gave a foolish little skip. "Well, look who decided to show up," he teased when she reached him. "Wasn't sure you'd make it after yesterday's arch marathon." Hannah smirked. "Wouldn't miss it. Besides, I owe someone a dance." They wandered through the festival side by side, weaving past booths piled high with jars of jam and tables stacked with caramel apples. Laughter spilled from the ring toss and pie-eating contests nearby. She glanced sideways at him, mischief sparking. "You know, Jack, I figured out your little scheme." Jack raised a brow. "Scheme?" he said. "Yeah, getting me to help with that arch? Sound familiar? You could have finished it in 2 days tops." For the first time, Hannah saw Jack look sheepish. He rubbed the back of his neck, gaze dropping briefly before finding hers again. "You're right, I could have. But I figured you wouldn't take a handout, and I wanted to help. You've got a good work ethic, Hannah. It's one of the many things I admire about you," he said. Her breath hitched, words tangling on her tongue, but before she could form a reply, an announcer's voice called for the first dance of the night. Jack nodded toward the dance floor, where couples already gathered, and offered his hand. "If I'm not mistaken, you promised to spare me a dance tonight, Miss Walker." Hannah slipped her hand into his, heart thudding as he led her to the dance floor. A slow tune spilled from the speakers, low and sweet, and then his arms were around her, warm and sure. She rested a hand lightly on his shoulder, the other clasped in his calloused grip. They swayed under the soft glow of lanterns and fairy lights, Hannah's world narrowing to the rhythm of music and the beautiful intensity of his eyes, steel gray with darker rims. They were piercing at first glance, but soft when he was smiling, as he was at this very moment. As if noticing he was staring at her, Jack cleared his throat. "Your tractor's nearly ready. With harvest coming up soon, you'll probably be working around the clock." "Yeah," Hannah murmured. "This is my shot to prove to Dad I can handle the farm." Jack's expression turned serious. "Hannah, you shouldn't keep this from him. Secrets have a way of costing more than you think." Her chest tightened. "Can we not talk about that right now? Just for tonight. I want to enjoy this, the arch, the festival, everything, she said. He studied her for a long beat, then nodded. For tonight, he agreed, pulling her closer. Hannah let her cheek rest against his chest, soaking in the steady thrum of his heartbeat. But as they swayed in time to the music, the feeling that he was right nagged at her. When she finally looked up to speak, their faces were inches apart, his breath brushing her lips. For a suspended moment, the music, the lights, the way his eyes searched hers, he leaned forward, almost imperceptibly, and the song ended. A lively voice cut through the night, announcing a line dance. Jack quickly stepped away from Hannah as more festival goers descended onto the dance floor. She began to follow him when Sophie appeared at her elbow with a wide grin. "Come on, girl, you're dancing with me," she said to Hannah. Hannah turned to Jack, reluctant to let go. "You in?" she asked. He shook his head with a wry smile. "I'll sit this one out. Never did learn the fancy footwork." Before she could answer, Sophie tugged her toward the floor to join their other friends. Hannah tried to lose herself in the swirl of dancing and laughter, but her mind kept drifting back to Jack, standing at the edge of the crowd, hands in his pockets, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Chapter 10. 2 days later, Jack pulled into the Walker farmyard with Hannah's tractor rumbling on the flatbed of his truck. Hannah hurried out, her heart leaping at the sight of the familiar green giant, whole again at last. "Runs better than new," Jack said, hopping down and securing the last strap. He paused, leaning an elbow on the truck bed as his gaze swept over the fields stretching out. "Looks like you're about to pull off something incredible," he said, a hint of pride in his voice. "You've held this place together when most people would have folded." "You know I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. Jack's mouth tipped in a half smile. "Maybe, but you've done the heavy lifting, that's for sure." His eyes softened, then grew serious. "Hannah, what you've done really is incredible, and I understand your reasons for keeping everything secret until now, but don't you think it's time to be honest with your dad? The harvest is important to him. Don't you think he deserves to know what's really going on?" She stiffened. "Why are you pushing this so hard? You know why I haven't said anything to him." Jack's jaw flexed. For a moment, he looked past her toward the fields before speaking. "Because I've been where you are. When I left my job, I didn't tell my folks right away. They'd sacrificed so much to put me through school, I thought I was protecting them. Turns out they were more hurt by the lie than the fact I'd quit a 6-figure job. Things never really went back to what they were. We talk, but it's not the same." His voice dipped low. "I don't want that for you, Hannah." Hannah swallowed hard, guilt pressing heavy against her ribs. "I'll tell him," she promised softly. "Just not yet. Not until harvest is done." Jack studied her for a long beat, then nodded, though his eyes said he wasn't convinced. "Just think about it, Hannah." But there was no spare time for her to give it any more thought. Harvest season roared to life, long days bleeding into crisp, starry nights. Luke managed to snag some time off from his internship to help, and even Grandma Maggie rolled up her sleeves. The potatoes came in healthy and plentiful, the hum of machinery and the scent of fresh earth filling Hannah's senses each day with triumph. When the last truckload rolled into storage, Hannah stood at the edge of the field with dirt on her jeans and sunlight on her face, a fierce pride swelling in her chest. They'd done it. She'd done it. The next afternoon, the family gathered for a celebratory lunch, extra special because Sam had managed to hobble to the dining room on his crutches for the first time since the accident. Grandma Maggie set out a mouth-watering spread of roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and apple pie. At the end of the meal, Sam called everyone's attention. He leaned heavily on his crutches as he stood and looked at Luke, his eyes bright with pride.
"Son, I can't tell you what it means to me seeing you step up like this. I was worried sick when the accident happened, thinking the harvest might fall apart, but you proved me wrong. You kept this place running when it mattered most. That's what being a walker means, shouldering the load, keeping the family legacy alive."
Hannah's stomach knotted, the guilt at lying to her father cutting deep. Each sentence was a weight pressing down like a stone in her chest. Poor Luke looked horribly uncomfortable, and Grandma Maggie fiddled nervously with her napkin. Hannah drew in a breath, ready to confess, when the phone rang. Sam held up a finger to the family and answered it. His earlier grin quickly faded.
"Follow-up service? No, you've got the wrong guy." "What do you mean, Hannah?" "Uh-huh. Sign the invoice?"
He was quiet for a moment before tersely saying,
"I see."
Sam hung up, storm clouds gathering in his eyes. He seethed for nearly a full minute before slowly asking,
"Hannah, why did Turner Equipment repair? Just tell me. You spent thousands on tractor repairs."
Hannah's pulse spiked. "Dad,
You've been running the farm, haven't you? How could you lie to me?"
His voice cracked like a whip. Words tumbled out from Hannah's mouth, desperate and tangled. "Dad, I only wanted to keep things going. Luke had his internship and you..." But Sam was beyond hearing. He suddenly turned his fury on Luke, his voice like a lash.
"And you? What were you doing this whole time? Playing on your damn computer while your sister cleaned up the mess? I thought I could count on you, Luke, but clearly I was wrong. You useless..."
"Stop it!" Hannah shot to her feet, heart pounding. "Don't you dare talk to him like that. He's been breaking his back with this internship and still found time to help when he could. This isn't on Luke, Dad. It's on me." Sam's face flushed, his voice rising with every word.
"This farm is not your responsibility. You went behind my back, Hannah."
He made to stand, but broke off, chest heaving.
"Get out, all of you. I can't. Just get out."
The room went silent. Maggie frozen in place. Luke pale as chalk. Hannah's breath sawed in her throat, her heart splitting down the middle. She rose slowly, her chair scraping the floor, and walked out without a word, her world crumbling with every step. Chapter 11. The cafe lights blurred through Hannah's tears as she pushed open the glass door of Bean and Birch. Sophie had just flipped the sign to closed, but one look at Hannah's face and she was unlocking it again, ushering her inside. "Honey, what happened?" Hannah began choking out the story between ragged breaths, every word tasting like failure. By the time Sophie slid a steaming mug of tea into Hannah's hands and guided her to a corner booth, the weight in Hannah's chest felt unbearable. Luke's stricken face, her dad's fury, and his stinging words still ringing in her ears. "It was awful, Sophie," Hannah whispered, her voice breaking. "This is all my fault. I know I probably should have told him sooner, but I just wanted to make it through harvest without a fight." Sophie slid into the booth across from her and grasped Hannah's hand. "No, this is Jack's fault. He promised not to tell your dad, and then he turned around and did." Hannah pulled her hands back, tightening them around the mug. Her first instinct was to defend Jack, but then realization slowly dawned. "He has been pressuring me lately to come clean," she admitted, guilt and anger tangling in her chest. "I just didn't think he'd do something like this." As if summoned by their words, Hannah looked up through the window and froze. Jack was walking down the sidewalk, his tall frame backlit by the street lights. He spotted her almost instantly, his eyes locking on hers through the window as he lifted a hand in a tentative wave before pushing open the door.
Sophie, I know the close sign's up, but I saw you and Hannah through the window and
He stopped short when his gaze landed on Hannah's tear-streaked cheeks. Concern flickered across his face, but before he could speak, Sophie rounded on him, eyes flashing.
How could you, Jack Turner? How could I what?
He asked. Don't you see the state of her? Sophie snapped, gesturing to Hannah. She's about to lose everything, and you're standing there acting like a deer in the headlights. Jack's brows knitted, confusion clear as he held up his hands.
Sophie,
No, Sophie interrupted him, her voice like steel. Get out of my cafe, Jack. Hannah doesn't need this right now. He hesitated, eyes darting to Hannah as if searching for some sign to stay, but she couldn't look at him, not when every broken piece inside her screamed that he'd betrayed her. Who else could have told her dad about the repairs?
I'll leave. I'm sorry if I came in at a bad time, Hannah,
Jack said quietly, the words raw in the stillness. Then he turned and walked out into the night. Hannah stared after him, heart splintering in ways she didn't want to name. How can he just pretend nothing happened? The thought pulsed with every beat of her breaking heart. She wrapped her arms around herself, the hollow ache settling deep. Sophie slid in beside her and wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. You're going to be okay, honey, she murmured. How am I going to make this right with Dad? Hannah whispered, her voice trembling. You will, Sophie said firmly. You just take it one step at a time. Give him space to cool down, then tell him the truth, that you did what you had to do to save the farm. He'll see that someday. Hannah let out a shaky breath, clinging to Sophie's words like a lifeline, even as doubt gnawed at her. One thing was certain. She had to focus on proving to her dad that she really did want to put the farm and her family first. No more distractions, no more almost kisses, and no more Jack Turner. Chapter 12. Sam's anger cooled into something far worse. Silence. Days stretched on, without so much as a glance in Hannah's direction, the warmth in his eyes replaced by a wall she couldn't climb. He didn't try to force Luke to give up the internship. He didn't acknowledge that Hannah had been running the farm. He ate meals in brooding quiet, his crutches propped against the wall like sentries. It was as if he'd carved a space around himself where none of them were welcome. One evening, Hannah stepped onto the porch to find Luke sitting on an overturned crate, elbows on his knees, staring at the dirt floor like it held all the world's answers. The last rays of sunset filtered through the slats in the walls, casting golden stripes across his hunched frame. Hey, she said, crossing the floor and easing down beside him. Luke gave a half-hearted shrug. You've got that guilty conscious face, she said gently. Wanna talk about it? He didn't answer right away, his fingers twisted together, knuckles white. Finally, he said, I've been thinking about quitting the internship. Hannah's heart clenched. Dad's not talking to anyone except Grandma. He still won't even look at you. And it's all because I didn't turn down that internship, he said. You're not being fair to yourself, Hannah answered firmly. Grandma and I both wanted you to take that internship. This isn't just you doing something to pass the time. This could kick off your whole career one day. If I leave the farm, I'll be betraying Dad. His voice was small. I can't do that. Hannah reached over, resting a hand on his shoulder. You're not betraying him, Luke. You're honoring yourself, and that matters too. Luke's shoulders drooped a bit further, clearly not believing her words, when another voice spoke up behind them. There's more to life than this farm. Hannah spun around to see Grandma Maggie standing in the doorway. She made her way over to the two of them and settled down on the other side of Luke. Have the two of you ever wondered why Grandpa was so adamant that Luke go to school and Hannah take over the farm? Luke paused and shook his head. I never really thought about it. Grandma Maggie smiled. Well, Henry always prided himself in being an attentive grandfather. He knew, long before anyone else, that you, she nodded to Hannah, had farming in your blood. I still remember you at 5 years old, out there in your little overalls, refusing to come in for a snack because you hadn't finished raking the rows with your toy hoe. A faint smile tugged at Hannah's lips. And Luke, Maggie continued, turning toward him, he always said you had the brightest mind he'd ever seen. You'd come home from school bursting with questions, talking about circuitry and solar panels and things that made your grandpa's head spin. She chuckled softly. He knew the fields would never hold you, not really, and he never held that against you. Quite the opposite. He was proud. Point is, Henry recognized both of your dreams. Her gaze softened, as if looking at her husband. Your grandpa had dreams too, once upon a time. Big ones. He wanted to study architecture in New York. Thought he'd build something more than barns. Hannah's jaw dropped. Grandpa didn't want to take over the farm? Grandma Maggie's expression turned sad then. No, sweetheart, he didn't. But his father, your great-granddad, he wouldn't hear of it. So Grandpa laid aside his dream. It wasn't all bad. We made a great life here on the farm. But I know Henry always wondered what could have been. Grandpa didn't want either of you spending the rest of your lives asking what if. His greatest wish was for the two of you to pursue your passions. The revelation hung in the air like dust motes in sunlight. Grandma Maggie's eyes shimmered as she looked between them, her voice soft but steady. I owe you both an apology. Hannah and Luke turned toward her, surprised. In the months after Grandpa passed, I was so desperate to honor his memory that I lost sight of what mattered most and pit you both against your father. I pushed you into keeping secrets. I knew my son would be furious when he found out, but I suppose I thought I could find a way to soothe the situation before anything got out of hand. Hannah swallowed, her throat thick with emotion. Luke's hand closed over Maggie's, silent but forgiving. Maggie smiled faintly, weary and loving. No more secrets. We face this together now, all of us. She looked between them with renewed resolve. And there's no sense in you giving up that internship now, Luke. What's done is done. And now that everything's out in the open, we move forward. She turned to Hannah. Didn't you tell me this was shaping up to be a record harvest? Hannah nodded slowly. Yeah, it is. Good, Maggie said, a fire lighting in her eyes. Then we're going to work hard and prove to that son of mine that this was a good decision after all. Not by arguing or sulking, but by showing him with results he can't ignore. Luke gave a hesitant smile, the tension in his shoulders easing just a little. Hannah felt a spark flicker to life inside her, too. It felt suspiciously like hope. Grandma Maggie might not have all the answers, but she just handed them a path forward. After that conversation, Hannah kept her head down, throwing herself into the farm work with a fierce determination. The harvest might be over, but there was still plenty to do, curing the potatoes, sorting and grading them, prepping for transport. She tackled each task with a laser focus, determined to prove to her father, her family, and maybe even herself, that she could carry the weight of the farm. Her muscles burned, her boots never fully dried, but she welcomed the ache. It meant she was still fighting, that she hadn't given up. But even her fierce dedication couldn't shield her from everything. The only thing that hampered her focus, aside from her father's cold fury, was Jack. He called at first. Then, when those went unanswered, he began texting. Emails followed. Some were updates on repairs at the shop. Others were just quiet check-ins. But Hannah couldn't bring herself to answer. Not when the hurt still sat so raw in her chest, with a text from him feeling like a splinter reopening the wound. The nights were the hardest. Sleep skittered away like a spooked colt, leaving her staring at the ceiling in the dark, while doubts pressed in on all sides. Then, one sharp-edged afternoon, Jack showed up at the door of the sorting shed where Hannah was busy working. His shadow fell long across the dusty floor as he stepped inside, boots crunching on stray bits of dirt. "Hannah." His voice was quiet, but carried an ache that cut straight through her. She didn't look up from the crate she was labeling. "I'm busy." Jack moved closer, stopping just short of her reach. "Hannah, I can tell I upset you. I just don't know what I did. Please, if you'd tell me, maybe I could make things right." Hannah's head snapped up, her voice rising before she could stop it. "Make things right? You're the reason everything's falling apart." Jack blinked, confusion darkening his brow. "What are you talking about?" he asked. "My dad knows," she snapped. "You promised me, Jack. You swore you wouldn't say anything." Jack straightened. I didn't. I swear I didn't. I would never." But she cut him off. "You were the only one outside of us who knew. So drop the innocent act, Jack. It's not going to work with me. If you were so set on denying you were the one to tell him, you shouldn't have made it so obvious with a service follow-up call." His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed even. "I get that you're upset. I'd be too. But I didn't rat you out, Hannah. You have to believe me." She laughed bitterly. "Believe you? That's rich, coming from the guy who spent weeks pressuring me to come clean. I should have known you'd eventually take matters into your own hands." Jack took a step closer, a hint of heat rising behind his words. "I pushed you because I care, because I didn't want you to go through exactly this. But I didn't betray your trust. That's not who I am. If you give me some time, I can help you get to the bottom of this," he said. "I can't do this right now," she said tightly, willing her voice not to shake. "I have too much on my plate, and I can't afford to waste more time on someone who—" She trailed off, swallowing hard. Jack's breath hitched. He waited for her to finish, but she didn't. A long silence settled between them before he finally nodded, wounded and unsure. He started to stalk off, but stopped at the door. "If you ever want to talk, I'll be around." Not likely, thought Hannah, as he walked away, boots crunching softly across the gravel floor. Chapter 13. By mid-October, the last of the potatoes had been shipped out, and the barn smelled faintly of earth and victory. The harvest was officially wrapped, the numbers finalized, and Hannah had double-checked every line item twice. She knew what they'd accomplished. Still, the idea of presenting it to her father sent a tremor down her spine. Grandma Maggie, tired of the quiet war between father and daughter, finally laid down the law. Sam was going to sit down and review the season's numbers with Hannah, whether he liked it or not. Grumbling and muttering under his breath, Sam agreed. He settled stiffly at the kitchen table, crutches leaning against the counter. Hannah slid a folder toward him and sat across the table, hands clasped tightly in her lap. For the first several minutes, the only sound was the turning of pages. Sam's brow furrowed, then lifted, then furrowed again. "You negotiated these rates?" he asked, tapping one of the contracts. "Yes," Hannah replied, her voice steady despite the nerves flaring in her chest. He flipped another page. "You got McKinley Foods to pay premium on the Yukon Golds?" She nodded. "They needed a late-season bulk and our quality was high." Sam exhaled slowly. leaning back. He closed the folder and looked up at her for the first time in weeks. There was no anger in his eyes now, just surprise and the beginnings of remorse underneath.
You ran a clean operation. Efficient. Turned a profit even after the hospital bills.
Hannah's throat tightened. And the savings are rebuilt, she said. Sam looked down, then back up.
You did good, Hannah. Real good.
The words settled over her like sunlight. She let out a shaky breath. I didn't know if you'd ever say that. Sam scratched at his jaw.
When I fell off that ladder, I thought everything I built, that our family built, was gonna slip through my fingers. But you done so good with the farm. Guess you don't really need your old man anymore to run things.
Her chest ached at that. You are needed, Dad. He gave her a sideways look.
Doesn't always feel like it. You and Luke grew up on me when I wasn't looking. Probably should have been there for you more, as a kid.
You were there, she said quietly, even if you didn't always say much. You were still there, Dad. Sam's shoulders dropped, as if letting go of a long-held weight.
Didn't know how to talk after your mom passed. She was the one who could soften things, make hard days bearable.
I remember, Hannah said, voice tight. I remember how she used to sing when she washed the dishes and said it made the boring chores feel better. And I remember how she used to make me hot chocolate when I had a bad day, and it always smelled like cinnamon when she hugged me afterwards. Sam smiled, the kind of smile that carried grief and warmth all at once.
She had a way, didn't she?
He said. Well, she probably would have had something better to say back when I first told you I wanted to run the farm in college, Hannah said with a smile. He sighed, with an answering smile of his own.
Would have kicked my behind, too, for shutting you down the way I did.
Hannah let out a surprised laugh, then reached across the table and laid her hand on his. I just wanted to make you proud, Dad.
You already have,
he said. No hesitation this time.
I was just too stubborn to admit it.
He shifted in his chair, frowning thoughtfully.
And I've probably been too hard on Luke. My dad always told me that boy's got a good head on his shoulders. He's chasing what he loves, and I've treated him like a traitor.
Hannah nodded. Grandpa didn't want Luke to go through what he did. Sam glanced up.
What do you mean? What did Grandpa go through?
She hesitated, then said, Grandma told us he wanted to move to New York and study architecture. Sam blinked.
Architecture? No, he was proud to carry on the farm.
He was, Hannah said softly, but it wasn't his first dream. I guess Great-Grandpa shut it all down before it came to anything. Sam stared at her, the lines around his eyes deepening.
He never told me that.
I think that's why he paid so much attention to our dreams. He saw how much I loved the fields, and he saw how much Luke loved school. I think Grandpa always noticed. Sam leaned back, the weight of memory pulling his features.
He did spoil you too rotten,
he said, but there was no bite in it, only affection and maybe a flicker of regret. He rubbed the bridge of his nose.
Maybe it's time I start listening better. I was angry when that new guy at Jack's shop called me about the follow-up service and mentioned your name, but what I put you and Luke through wasn't right. I'm sorry, Sunshine. Truly am.
I forgive you, Dad, she whispered. And I'm sorry for my part, too, for lying to you. Sam reached out to squeeze her hand again.
Need to go find your brother. We'll talk again soon, kiddo.
As he hobbled off on his crutches, Hannah's breath caught as a realization bloomed. Relief and guilt rushed in all at once, crashing through her like a tide. Her dad had forgiven her for the lie, but would Jack forgive her for her false accusations? She'd been wrong, terribly, unfairly wrong. Apparently, the Walker temper, sharp-edged and slow to cool, was just as alive in her, too. She'd been so quick to assume, to cut Jack off, to hold on to her hurt like a precious jewel, but it had all been a big misunderstanding. Just Jack's eager new hire trying to follow up on a service invoice, probably hoping to make a good impression. She needed to fix it, and soon. Chapter 14. The sun was dipping low by the time Hannah parked her truck outside Turner Equipment Repair. The golden hour cast long shadows across the gravel lot, stretching toward the shop like a path urging her forward. She wiped her palms on her jeans as she stepped out. The shop lights were still on, warm and glowing through the windows like a beacon. It had been weeks since she last saw Jack. The bell above the shop door jingled as she stepped inside. Jack looked up from his workbench, sleeves rolled to the elbow. When he saw her, surprise flickered across his face, replaced by a quiet softness, hopeful, guarded. "Hey," he said carefully, wiping his hands on a rag. "Hey back," she echoed. For a beat, neither of them spoke. Then Hannah took a breath. "I thought you told him." "Hannah, I told you before I'd never do that to you, but I do know how it happened now, and you were right. It was connected to my shop." Her throat tightened. "I know that now. Dad told me it was your new assistant who called. Said he was following up on a service invoice, just doing his job." Jack exhaled slowly, shoulders loosening. "I should have told him to leave your family's account alone. Guess he got eager." "It wasn't your fault," she answered softly. "But I was so sure it was, and I took it out on you, unfairly." He nodded once. "Yeah, that stung." Hannah stepped forward, the shop light casting a glow around them. "I really made a mess of everything, didn't I?" "You were hurting. I get it," he answered. "I was so mad at my dad for the way he reacted to me when he found out. For the yelling, for the silence. And then I did the same thing to you. I shut you out. Assumed the worst. I really owe you an apology, Jack, and I'm really so very sorry. I still have a lot to work on." Jack studied her for a moment before cutting in. "I know you've had to push down a lot of things over the years, especially since your mom passed. I know that a lot of those feelings were probably bubbling up after your dad had his accident." She looked away, but he stepped closer. "I want you to know I'm not scared of your feelings, Hannah." Her eyes met his again, wide and searching. "I looked forward to you coming into the shop every day, even when you were grumpy and muttering about welding." A watery laugh bubbled out of her before her face settled into a serious expression. "Thank you for saying that. And again, I'm so sorry, Jack. And I can understand if you need space or don't really want to be friends after everything I put you through." But Jack only laughed. Hannah, did you hear anything I just said? I care about you," he said simply. "And if I'm honest, I care about you more than a friend." She stepped into the circle of light, heart thudding. "I care about you too, Jack. More than I let myself admit. You've been steady and kind, and you make me feel like I can do things I never thought I could." Jack reached for her hand, calloused fingers brushing hers. "So, what do we do now?" Hannah smiled. "Well, you did say I was getting pretty good with a torch. Maybe I can make it all up to you by helping with a project." He chuckled. "We do make a good team, but I can think of some better ways to spend our time together than stuck in this shop." The moment stretched between them, electric and tender, and then, under the glow of the shop light, with the scent of sawdust and oil hanging in the air, Jack leaned in. Their lips met softly, tentatively, a kiss that asked rather than took. But slowly it deepened, not with urgency, but with certainty. It tasted of second chances and promised new beginnings. When they finally pulled apart, Jack rested his forehead against hers. "I'm glad you came back," he said. "Me too," Hannah whispered. Outside, the sun disappeared beyond the horizon. Inside, a new light bloomed. Epilogue. A year later, the farm glistened beneath a soft September sun, the fields rustling with promise. The farmhouse porch was lined with baskets of apples and late-blooming dahlias, and laughter echoed from somewhere behind the barn. Life, as Hannah Walker knew it, had settled into something steady and sweet. She and her dad worked the land side by side now. It wasn't always easy. They butted heads often, especially when Sam grumbled about her experimental nonsense involving cover crops and compost tea, but he always helped her test her ideas, and he never missed a chance to brag about her when neighbors dropped by. Luke had left for college with a renewed sense of purpose and Sam's blessing, and thanks to a few persuasive conversations with Grandma Maggie, Sam had officially carved out a portion of the farm for Hannah to manage as she saw fit. It wasn't everything, not yet, but it was a start, a real start. And Jack had become a part of the family in that quiet, natural way of his. He came to Sunday dinners, helped fix whatever was falling apart that week, and brought iced coffees for Hannah when she was stuck in the field on hot days and work was slow for him. On a warm afternoon, with the rush of harvest behind them, Jack took Hannah on a picnic beneath the old cottonwood tree at the highest point of the farm. A checkered blanket, a couple of sandwiches, and a mason jar of lemonade between them. They sat, shoulder to shoulder, gazing out at the gentle swells of hills and rows of crops. Jack had one arm draped behind her.
"It's beautiful up here,"
he said. Hannah nodded. "It's my favorite spot. I used to sit up here when I was younger and dream about what life might look like." Jack looked at her sideways.
"And did it turn out how you imagined?"
She smiled, turning toward him. "Better. Harder, messier, more beautiful, and full of surprises." He leaned in, brushing his nose against hers.
"Hope I'm one of the good surprises,"
he joked. "The best," she whispered. Their lips met in a kiss that was soft and certain, like the settling of roots into good earth. A promise exchanged without words, built on quiet effort, second chances, and something slow and steady taking hold. When they pulled apart, Hannah leaned her head on Jack's shoulder, her eyes sweeping over the hills she'd tended and the plants she was growing. The fields were quieter now, the harvest tucked away, but something deeper had taken root, not just in the soil, but in her heart. Thanks so much to those of you who have stayed to the end and patiently listened to my attempts to do all the voices in this story. I have a lot of fun doing the voices, but I know that they don't really stay consistent as the story progresses. Let me know in the comments if you think I should ease off the voices or if you think they add something to the story. When I was working on the first draft of this, I realized that Hannah was a bit of a Mary Sue. She was always saying the right thing to her brother and her grandma and was just endlessly patient with her dad, and then she just out of the blue iced out Jack, and I realized that wasn't really in character for her the way she'd been set up in the story, and that's when I realized that she was a little too perfect. And with the stories I've been working on, I've been really trying to have folks really be human. I want them to have flaws and strengths and just be kind of well-rounded. So as I was thinking of flaws for Hannah, I realized that being raised by someone like Sam Walker, who has an explosive temper, could probably do a couple things to her. She could be a wallflower and a super timid person, or she could be the type of person who has that same fiery temper. I imagine that she was quite the handful as a kid, and as she grew up, kind of learned to temper herself and really sees herself as different from her dad. She sees her dad as someone who's, super angry and explosive, but I think she really thinks for most of the story that that's not her. But we see a number of outbursts coming from her. So I hope it didn't come quite out of left field when she got super mad at Jack towards the end of the story. But I'd love to know your thoughts on that. Was it believable, or do I need to work on my characterization a little bit better? Would love to hear your feedback. And if you enjoyed this story, which I'm hoping you did if you made it to the end, please give this video a like. It really helps me out with the algorithm to push this out to other folks who would probably enjoy this content as well. And if you haven't already subscribed and want to hear more stories, I invite you to do so. I'm going to be posting videos once a week from now until the end of December, and potentially moving to a bi-weekly cadence in January, but we'll see how things go once we get there. Anyways, thanks so much for listening. I hope you have a really great day, and stay cozy, friends.